so I set myself rules. It should take no longer than between 10 or 15 minutes. There's no pre-drawing, straight in with the pen. Never do something that wasn't true.
Is that how long it takes? 10 to 15 minutes?
Yeah.
It would take me the rest of my life to do one.
You're very kind.
Today, I'm speaking to Gary Andrews, who is an animator. His wife passed away a few years ago, and prior to that, he had started doing a drawing each day to practice his skills. And after his wife passed away, he carried on doing that in order to help him deal with the grief and cope with things. So take a look. There's some interesting points on dealing with difficult emotions and also some interesting things about the animation industry. So take a look. I was just watching you doing your live stream of your animation.
Oh, right.
On YouTube. It's pretty cool. Yeah. just to start us off, kind of, I've seen you on a couple of media appearances talking about the drawings that you do and the drawing, like why you do it. But anyone who doesn't know who you are, why don't you give us a bit of a background before we move on to why you do your sort of doodle a day thing?
Oh, goodness. Okay. My name's Gary Andrews, and I'm ancient, and I've been a professional animator, artist, illustrator for 40 years. And I've worked in all sorts of media and movies and TV and all that sort of nonsense. But I've sort of kept myself under the radar mostly in life, just sort of getting on with the job. But when my wife died 4 years ago is when my daily doodle diary sort of took off, as that became a kind of a grief journey, and it got noticed, and that's when sort of things went a bit nuts on the social media side, which has been an interesting journey.
I think it was the one show I saw you on.
Yes, that was about a year after she died. I think I was on there. It was just coming up to it was around about the first anniversary I was on, and they asked me to do a little film, which I did a little animated film.
I made the mistake of watching that 10 seconds before I called you, and then it was like choked up, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to talk now. It really hits a punch, doesn't it?
Oh, thank you. I mean, it was obviously, as you can imagine, it was very much a labour of love and done from the heart, and was telling a story that I thought was important for to tell, really. And for me, it was kind of quite cathartic in a way to sort of work through that when you're having to draw that many hundreds of drawings, of that material. It was.
How long did that take you to do, out of interest?
Oh gosh, it's hard to tell because I was doing it in my downtime between sort of work. But I suppose if I'd sat at my desk and done it solidly, it was probably about a week and a bit. Okay. I suppose. But that's done in evenings and things.
I'll put a link underneath the video so that anyone who wants to watch it can see it as well. But to be able to kind of hit somebody's emotions in such a short period of time is crazy. I'll just watch this really quickly. I'll just watch this a couple of minutes, and then you're totally.
It was quite a moving experience. I mean, when we showed it on the one show, I mean, it's an interesting program to record because they've got a standing audience that are in the room, and they're all sort of there, and you're sat there. And I had a little rehearsal beforehand with Matt and Angelica, just sort of talking it through, but you don't really rehearse, you just chat. And they said they'd seen it, and then I said, oh yeah, and of course it's really special to me because the music is Joy's music that she composed, and she's playing it, and I'm doing that. And Matt said, oh, I didn't know that. So when we showed it on the show live, it was the first time he'd watched it since he knew that, and he got quite emotional as well. And the floor manager came up to me afterwards and said, usually when the VTs are playing, you've got all this buzz and noise in the studio until they finish and they count them back in, and you could hear a pin drop. And she said she'd never seen that before, which was kind of quite a thing, really. I didn't sort of realize till afterwards that wasn't normal. So it was kind of a rather lovely experience, and just shows that, I think what it shows is that it's such a universal emotion and experience to go through. And although it's my story I'm telling there, it touches a chord with everybody, because at some point we're all going to be touched with this. And I think that is what goes beyond the fact that it's just my story, is that it touches everybody. But not everybody talks about it or has a medium like I'm lucky enough to have, to be able to tell that story. So to be able to have that opportunity to get out and talk about this kind of thing is quite a privilege, really.
It is for sure. And so to clarify for people who don't know, you do a hand drawing actually each day, don't you, as well? So
Yes.
even though we've got all this kind of modern technology these days, and I would imagine in your professional work, you're doing mostly computer work these days.
I'm constantly sat at a digital screen, drawing on a screen with a pen, electric paper. And I've been doing that for years. And I started doing the diary because I felt I was losing touch with the analog life, and I wanted to get back to the scratch of pen on paper and no undo button. And so I thought, well, the best way to do that is try and draw something every day. And I thought, well, then to draw every day, let's make it a diary, because then you have to, so last thing at night every day I would sit down and do a drawing based on something I'd thought, felt, seen, done that day. And I've been doing that for about 1.5 years before Joy died, so it had become a sort of daily habit. But yeah, so I set myself rules. It should take no longer than between 10 or 15 minutes. There's no pre-drawing, straight in with the pen. Never do something that wasn't true.
How long it takes? 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It would take me the rest of my life to do one.
You're very kind. No, they're deliberately quite quick. The technique I use is quite fast, and they're about 15 minutes, I suppose. Some of them literally are just 5-10 minutes, but I guess you're looking at 10 to 15 as an average. Once in a blue moon, I'll do one that might take about 20 because I want to do something a bit more detailed, but it's quite rare. Yeah,
and it's quite a cathartic process. I mean, you've used it as a therapy, really, haven't you?
I used it as a kind of self-counseling, when I get to work through the grief, but just in terms of a daily practice, it's kind of, to use a sort of modern buzzword, it's kind of like a mindfulness thing. You sit down at the end of the day and you're unpacking your day. You're thinking, right, what happened today? What struck me today? What, whatever. And doing a drawing based on that. And then you don't have that thing lying in bed with it buzzing around your head. You've put it out on paper. You can then dump it. You can brain dump that. And that was my sort of thing I was doing every day. And then after Joy died, it became the process of the grief feelings and the looking after the kids and all that kind of thing that was a different set of experiences that I was feeling, and sometimes were quite hard to process, hard to deal with. By putting them down on paper, it just took that pressure off. And it also meant that as I went along, I could look back and see the journey I'd had as well. If I was ever having a rough day, I could look back and see the ups and downs and know that this too shall pass when you have a bad day and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, so you can read your emotional journey from the drawings that you've done, really.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You can even see it in the style of the drawing. I mean, for myself, I can see when I was struggling that the line work is different to the days when I'm in a really good zone and stuff like that. And it's subtle, but for me, I see it. And it's been an incredible, useful journey for me. And I've now done a series of sort of online workshops talking to people about it and stuff as well, working with the Good Grief Festival. And I did a series of ones where I was talking through different ways that you can use it to sort of help yourself to sort of self-counsel and just make your life that little bit easier, I guess, by unburdening through drawing.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were drawn to that way of dealing with it out of sort of a natural instinct because you've got a skill in it. But did you retrospectively look back and see if there was any, actual history of this kind of therapy?
Everything I've done since Joy died has been purely instinctive. I sort of avoided the books, ironically having written one, but I kind of avoided a lot of the books on it because it is a very personal journey. And I had, my parents both died by the time I was 30, so I'd experienced sort of close grief anyway.
Yeah.
So the practical side of grief, if you like, I kind of had that box ticked in terms of I knew what to do when it came to that. But emotionally, it's very difficult losing your life partner to losing a parent. You expect to lose a parent, at some point. Yeah. Bit later than I did, but you still expect to. But to lose a life partner who is 15 years younger than yourself, you just don't expect that. So it was a different emotional journey. But no, I also chose not to go down any of the kind of therapy routes and stuff. I was offered counselling, and I chose not to. Having said that, I think it's an incredible thing for people who want it.
Yeah.
But because I'm a communicator naturally through my work, I didn't have trouble talking about it with friends, with my children, and by putting it into the drawing, it kind of served the same function as having counselling or anything like that would. And I just found my own path. And since then, I have sort of heard a bit more about this kind of thing. And yes, there are obviously art therapy is a thing. We know that.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's many people that are doing it quite this way that I do. Certainly from the feedback I've had from the workshops and stuff, people are saying it's something a bit different for them. And they do seem to, I know a few people that have taken it on and given it a go. And a lot of people do journaling. I mean, that's quite a popular way of dealing with it, and that can involve drawing and as well as writing and stuff. And I think that's fantastic. I've got a couple of very close widow friends who do the journaling thing, and it's brilliant. And I thoroughly recommend it. But this is a slightly different technique, I guess. But yeah, so yeah.
If you don't mind broaching,
answered the question.
No, you did answer.
Okay.
If you don't mind broaching the subject, I saw that you discussed it on the one show and you seemed comfortable sort of discussing it. What were the circumstances under which she passed away?
Sure. Okay. Well, she was 41, fit, healthy. Just joy, that's my lovely wife. And we had a weekend away in Glastonbury selling DVDs of a film we've made, and we've been at this sort of fairy festival, and we'd gone down with the kids, and she'd been off doing fun stuff with them while I stood on a stall for all weekend, and going down the pub in the evening, eating curry and listening to folk music, just having like the best weekend. It was like our perfect weekend.
Yeah.
And then on the Monday, she drove me to Heathrow because I had to go to Vancouver for work on the job I was working on. And then so I phoned her on the Tuesday to see how she was doing, like you do. And she said she felt a bit rough, a bit fluey. So you say, take a tablet, put your feet up.
Yeah.
Same on the Wednesday, still feeling crap. And I said, the kids had gone around to grandma's to give her a bit of a break. Phoned on the Thursday and she couldn't come to the phone. And my daughter came to the phone and said that her Joy's sister was there and they'd called a doctor. And, and I said, oh, okay, let me know what's going on. And I went out to lunch on the Thursday in Vancouver, so I'm behind, time wise.
Yeah.
And while I'm at lunch, I get this phone call from my sister-in-law saying, is there any chance you can get an early flight home? She's in hospital and she's very poorly. And I went, yep, and instantly jumped on the thing, got myself the red eye, flew back over the Thursday night. And by the time I landed Friday lunchtime, she was already dead. She died at 3:15 in the morning, and it was sepsis, and it just went bang really fast.
Just unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable.
It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. I mean, in an instant, it was a 180-degree turnaround on my life. It just completely changed in an instant.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, she's in hospital. Maybe she's got something. Maybe she needs to be in hospital for a couple of weeks. Starting to look after the kids. They might, whatever. You just don't, it doesn't contemplate that she wouldn't be there when I got home. It was quite a surreal, shocking. It was just bizarre.
It sounds incredibly surreal. And frightening as well. It's like that things can, turn around.
It's so fast. Yeah, it is. It's crazy. I mean, sepsis is a sneaky. Are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Go for it.
I say sepsis is a sneaky fucker, and it's kind of like you've got to look for it, and there are signs, and I post quite a bit about it. And if you check out the UK Sepsis Trust, they've got a load of things you can look up to sort of look for the signs, because it's so sneaky, and you can be or seem perfectly healthy and then just gets you. So just be aware, just ask the questions if you're feeling down and feeling poorly and stuff. Is
there a specific way that one contracts it, or is it can be many ways?
No, I mean, basically it's crazy. What it is it's your body going into aggressive defense mode. It usually happens if you've got an infection or a double infection or something like that. And so what we think happened with Joy, she had this fluey sore throat thing going on, but about a week or two before, she probably had a slight other I think it was like a urinary tract infection or something, just a very small thing that hadn't quite gone. Then this came up on top of it, and her body just decided to go into aggressive defense mode. And what it does, it just attacks itself. It's insane.
That is just terrifying. I mean, I didn't really know what sepsis was. I thought it was some sort of blood infection you could get.
They say septicemia is it's like blood poisoning, but it's also just aggressive. It's multiple organ failure is what actually technically killed her. And it's the sepsis that caused that. So it's curable with antibiotics if you catch it early enough. That's the crazy thing about it.
Spotting it, isn't it? It's spotting it because it's so insidious.
Yeah, exactly. But there's plenty of information out there if you want to look for it, and please do, people, because it is you know, it's not fun.
Yeah, I'll post something, also
Yeah,
video
please
as
do.
well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's terrifying. So yeah, but so moving away from that, then you mentioned that
Sure.
you had been in animation for 40 years. That's a long time to be in animation.
Yeah,
So
I guess it's 38 if I'm accurate. I was rounding up. Yes, 38 years.
you must have seen an awful lot of change in that time. How did you get involved with it to begin with?
It's crazy. I was it's really funny actually. I was at art college. I graduated in 1981 from art college from Exeter, and I've drawn all my life, and I thought, well, I'll be an illustrator. I was studying illustration. I love making films, and I wanted to make lots of films while I was there. And of course, I'm on an illustration course. You can't make films. I said, well, oh, I know, maybe I'll do some animation, because there's an animation roster, but one of the tutors knew how to load it, but that was about it. No one taught it. So I self-taught myself a couple of films at college and made them for fun, just so I could get to do a bit of filmmaking. Never put together in my head that my two favorite things, drawing and filmmaking, combined in animation. It just never occurred to me as a kid, as a youngster, as growing up as a student. I was never one of these people that said, I want to be an animator. It was like, I want to be an illustrator who makes films for fun.
Yeah.
And I'd never put the two together. So even when I left college, I went around the animation studios with my portfolio, thinking I could design stuff for people, maybe, still not thinking about animating, even though I've made some films. It's just insane when I look back at it. And I went into a studio. I did get a little bit of work in betweening on an animated film. The first film I ever worked on, Rupert and the Frog Song. And
the McCartney.
Boom. Really? Yeah. Awesome. I did a week on that in betweening.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Fireflies Bottoms. That's
a great way to start. Yeah.
And I'm still friends with Jeff, who directed it. All these years later, it's brilliant. But I did that, and then I went into another studio, and I showed them my stuff, and I showed them a film, and the boss said, yeah, this is great stuff, we like it. How do you feel about coming in? Well, one of the guys is going off to hospital. He's for an operation. His desk's going to be empty for 3 weeks. Do you fancy coming in and sitting in and learning on the job? I went, oh yeah, great. And they started throwing stuff at me, and I started doing it, and nobody told me it was hard, so I kind of just got on with it.
Yeah.
And that 3 weeks turned into about 3.5 years in that studio, basically. I just stayed put, and I learned on the job, and fell in love with it, and realized that I had a natural affinity for animation, and I've been in it ever since. But the second part of your sort of lead into that, you must have seen a lot of changes. I mean, absolutely. When I started, everything was still on paper. We were shooting on 35mm still on the big rostrum cameras. We were working exactly the same way they'd made Snow White in 39.
Oh wow!
Nothing had changed really. It was exactly the same. The only tiny thing was we had a little bit of digital line testing, so we could film stuff on big chunky U-matic videotapes to do the line testing. But all the proper stuff was still done on paper, on film, and it stayed that way for quite a while. And then had a little spell with Disney over here, doing some stuff on a couple of little films and TV projects. Really? And even then we were still doing it the same way. We still had the big camera in the basement, and everything was on
down, isn't it? And
the big camera, big rostrum camera with the plate, the glass underneath. Yeah, it was amazing. And then I started getting into and I worked a load of shorts. And even into the 90s, we were still working that way. And then the sort of digital side started taking off a bit, but it was round about that point, I guess, that I started doing less animation and more storyboarding and directing and stuff. So I was still working on paper, and then slowly the animators started drifting away a little bit from the drawn, and all the CG stuff started coming in and all that. Now, I haven't got a clue how to make something move in CG. I don't know what buttons to press to make it, but I know how to direct it because I know what movement is about. It's two different things. So these days, a lot of my work is directing CG animation, where all these people who know exactly what buttons to press are making everything move. But as a director, I understand movement and performance, and I can direct it from that perspective. And then there's been a little bit of a resurgence of drawn stuff as well recently. Really? But now we've got this sort of lovely software. I use a thing called TV Paint, which is electronic. I'm still working on my electric paper, but it's hand drawn. I'm using a pen, and it's kind of like, it's got all the great things about working with hand drawn, but you've got all the advantages of digital as well. So it's this kind of interesting hybrid now.
So it's like
and quite a few projects are done on that.
Is it like a plate then that's paper and you draw onto it, but it transfers?
It's like a screen, like a TV screen, if you like, that you're drawing on with a pen, and on there you've got a timeline, and you can click it forward frame by frame, and you can draw, and you can see the previous drawing sort of ghosted back, and it's just like drawing on the paper like you used to with your light box and several sheets of paper.
I remember I remember seeing animators flicking backwards and
flicking the paper, exactly. Well, you can do that digitally in this now, so it's kind of like, I do miss flicking the paper and drawing that way. It still had something about it that it's very hard to replicate. But there are lots of good advantages now to the digital stuff as well. And so I've got this sort of in this nice place now where I'm sort of doing quite a bit of hand-drawn. I'm working on a project at the moment where I'm animation directing on a feature, and it's being done in CG. But a lot of the stuff I'm doing is sending them hand-drawn guides for the sort of performance, which I'm doing very rough and quick in this hand-drawn animation. So I'm still hand drawing, but without having to clean up, and then other people are pressing buttons to make lovely shiny things move, and it's a kind of really nice place to be at the moment professionally. So
are they using the sketches that you give them exactly, or are they replicating them?
They're using them as a sort of timing and performance guide for what they're doing, and then hopefully building on it and doing the things that the computer can do really well that I could if I had more time, but I'm trying to do everything. So and then they've got a team of people doing it slower and in more detail. So yeah, they're using them very much as a close guide, which is really nice. It just means that I can set the performance style and the acting and the little visual moments to help them, and then they can take that and build on it and put their own stamp on it. So it's quite a nice way of doing things. And then on top of that, I do a lot of illustration as well, and that is all done digitally these days, but again, hand drawn digitally. I don't use vector graphics. I'm not one of the people that uses like Illustrator. I use a thing called Sketchbook, which basically, again, it's electric paper. So the line looks like ink or looks like pencil, or looks like paint, but you're just doing it. You've got an undo button, which is great.
Which is awesome. Do you have is it like pressure sensitive as well? Is that?
Yeah, it is. It's all pressure sensitive, and it's a fabulous bit of kit. It's called a Cintiq. It's by a company called Wacom, and it's called a Cintiq tablet. And if anyone listening is interested in that sort of thing, they can look it up. CINTIQ. They're wonderful things. It's a bit like drawing on an iPad in something like Procreate or whatever, but on a bigger scale.
Okay, that sounds like things have dramatically shifted, then, haven't they? In that period of time.
Huge. I mean, the technology, and there was this period in the middle of it all when the technology was beginning, and I used to sort of draw on paper, then scan that into color in the computer. It'd be this kind of half and half. And I did that for quite a long time, until the sort of pens and computers caught up with what you could do by hand. Now it pretty much all happens in the computer, because the pens are lovely and pressure sensitive, and you've got all these different types of pen you can click on to get the exact sort of line you want or whatever. So it's I don't technology. At the end of the day, it's just another tool, and it's like, I must imagine what it must have been like when back in the day when the artists were grinding their own paints and stuff like that, like in the Renaissance, and then suddenly people started producing it in tubes. They'd be like, oh, this modern technology, you're not grinding your own paint, how can you be a proper artist? And then acrylics come out after oils, and it's like, every time there's a change in the technology or whatever, everyone must think, it's the end of art. And it's the same with technology. It comes along and everyone embraces it, and then it goes back a little bit and they find ways of working, and it's I'm always a slightly late adopter. I always let things find their feet a bit before I go into them. I don't dive in. I didn't go onto computers straight away when everybody else did. I stayed very much analog for quite a while, until I felt I was ready and that technology was ready, for what I wanted it to do. So I'm not a tech head, but I do like it as a tool. Yeah.
So looking to the future, then, I guess, in terms of your therapy and in terms of your work, how do you see it going? I mean, I'm imagining this doodle a day now is going on.
I intend to do that until I can no longer hold a pencil. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's part of my ritual now. I find it, I can't go to bed if I haven't, or if I do, if I've been just for some reason once or twice, it's a really late night and I've been out or whatever, and you get back, you go, Then I get up early. I do it first thing in the morning. I do the previous day's one first thing before anything else. Because I can't let that day go I still need to unpack it. So it's become part of my daily ritual. So yes, I intend to keep doing that forever until I'm in my box.
Ongoing therapy for you then.
An ongoing therapy, an ongoing thing, and an ongoing just, I mean, I find it's a nice way to look back at my day, and a nice way to look back at my life. It's a legacy for my children, that because they appear in it, they see the world, their life changing, my life changing, and when I'm gone, they'll have this row of sketchbooks they can look back on and see their lives. You know, we have our photo albums, but we don't photograph everything, and you can't photograph an emotion, and sometimes the drawings are about a feeling rather than a thing, and it's that, you know, is going to be preserved for them and for whatever. And I will always keep doing it on paper. I mean, eventually I may move away from the brown. It depends if I can't get hold of them anymore. I like working on the brown because it's a mid-tone, so I get to do the dark.
Really nice. Yeah.
But if and when those sort of disappear, then I might shift onto something else. But it'll always be hand drawn. It'll always be in the sketchbooks. It'll always be what it is. I'll never go digital for the doodle a day, because I like the physical object on the shelf. Yeah. The row of books. Okay. Work-wise,
the kids also, how are they doing? You mentioned them there. How are they getting?
Yeah, they're doing great. I mean, they've been incredible. As a family, we talk a lot, and we've included Joy in our everyday life, you know, ever since she died. So she's present in their lives in that way. You know, so that I think they've accepted her death because we've kept the memory and the love alive of her, rather than not talking about it or brushing it or making it a sort of thing that was, it's what's happened, and we've embraced that, and we talk about it daily, just that casually, you know. And there's not a day goes by that she doesn't come up in some way, and there are pictures and all that sort of thing. So they've done really well. I mean, they do great at school. They're good at communicating about it to other people. They're happy to talk about it with. So yeah, they've been brilliant, and they found their own little ways of dealing. My daughter sort of started off writing a bit of poetry and stuff, and now she's just very good communicator with other people and is very empathic. If people have got problems, she's the sort of person that kids will go to, and that's quite lovely. And then my son, he sort of comedy was his thing. He just got very funny and very surreal, really, and quite dark sense of humor as well, you know. And I think that's the way he's processed it, is through a very dark, quirky sense of humor, and he's sort of coming out the other side of that a little bit now, but to be able to sort of openly talk about it more, but he's still very funny and very quirky.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they've been great, and they're both quite good with their art. I mean, he's very good at crafts and stuff, and does a little bit of drawing. Lily, my daughter, is turning into a very, very good little artist as well, and loves drawing, so that's great too.
She's inherited the talent as well.
It would seem that the gene has kind of wandered in there somewhere a bit, yeah. She hasn't got the passion for it that I did. The sort of, you know, you never saw me without a pencil in my hand. You know, she will sit and do it off her own back, not quite as much as I did, but she certainly has a love of it, but perhaps not the need of it that I did. I'm just happy to tootle along, and if people still ask me to draw stuff, I'll draw it. And I never really, I've never had a plan. And I kind of don't have one now. I just enjoy what I do, and if the phone keeps ringing, I'll keep going, and I don't really plan to ever stop because I love it, and it's not exactly physically demanding. So I'm quite happy to be sitting here, you know, when I'm well into my dotage, just perhaps not doing quite as much, but and picking and choosing the jobs a bit more, but no, I just sort of carry on, really. I'll bob along and see what comes my way. You never know what the next phone call is. And I sort of go along. I've kind of taught myself recently to say no. It's something that I found very hard over the years as a freelancer and as someone who loves the job. Work comes in sometimes, you go, yeah, I'll do that. Because you never know where the next one's going to be. I'll do that. And I've sort of reached a point, I have to admit. I mean, I'm 60 now, and I'm kind of like thinking, okay, I'm not, I do quite like a bit of me time now. And with the kids being the age they are, they're great company. And I'm in a new relationship, which is wonderful as well. So I want to give that time and all that kind of thing. So I've actually kind of learned to say, you know what, I'm busy enough. I'll have to pass on that one. Thank you very much. And that's quite a recent development for me, really, because I've never been very good at it. So I guess career-wise, maybe that is the big thing for me, is learning to say no.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'll keep embracing the technology as it comes along. But I'm really happy with where it is at the moment, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that case, given that you're saying no to people more now, I'm going to say an even bigger thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, well, this is a pleasure. This is not something I need to say no to. This is a delight, and I'm happy to do these sort of things always.
Yeah, it certainly was for me anyway. I really appreciate you talking to me.
Oh, thank you.
Right, well, thanks very much for your time.
My absolute pleasure, Jack. No problem at all, mate.